Hi, and welcome to Bizarre and Spooky. I am Barb, your host. Happy Halloween! Today is Halloween, and I am so happy to be posting my first Halloween episode today. This topic is one of my favorite cryptids or creatures, depending on what you think. I have 2 kids, and I know how kids can be creepy from time to time, but kids with black eyes and make you feel uneasy when you encounter them is the most creepiest thing ever. I am going to share with you the story of the black-eyed kids, also known as the black-eyed children, or BEK or BEC. Late at night, while getting ready for bed, your cat seems to be acting odd and hissing at the door. A few minutes later, you hear knock, knock, knock on your front door. You look out the window of the door and you see 2 kids standing on the porch. It's odd that young kids would be out at this time of the night. Their heads are facing down. Suddenly, one kid says, "Please let us in. Can we call our parents?" You suddenly feel freaked out. But why you're feeling freaked out over kids, you don't understand. You go to open the door, and the other kid says, "Let us in." You get a chill, so cold that you can feel it in your bones. They look straight at you in the window, and their eyes are black like obsidian, and they're staring through your soul. You have just encountered the black-eyed kids. The legend of the black-eyed children have dated back since 1996, and it is a fairly new legend. There have been stories that have started in 1980. These kids are said to be between the ages of 6 and 16. They have outdated clothes or are wearing hoodies and jeans. The kids use outdated speech, like asking to use a telegraph. Every encounter with the black-eyed kids, they're asking to come into your car or into your house. Their eyes are deep, solid black orbs with no whites at all. After a few minutes, they can become hostile or insistent to get into the house or car. These sightings have started to appear all over the world. Some people believe they are ghosts with their pale skin and old clothing, while others think it could be demons not being able to come in without being invited, and soulless black eyes. Another theory that they are aliens from another dimension or planet. They could be cryptids or creatures. In my opinion, I'm leaning towards alien. Anyone that have encountered these kids, either at home or in their cars, have felt horrified and sick. One of the first stories of the black-eyed kids is the one that Brian Bithwell wrote to the mailing list dedicated to telling paranormal stories. Brian was a journalist of Abilene, Texas. One night in 1996, he stopped in front of the Old Westwood movie theater to fill out a check he needed to mail in to the cable company. He used the lights from the theater to help him see as he was writing the check. He jumped at the sound of a knock on his window of his car. He looked over at the window with the pen still in his hand. Staring out the window, there were 2 young boys. Even though they were wearing hoodies covering their heads, he could tell that they were roughly teens, with one slightly older, about 9 or 12 years old. Brian opened the window a crack, and while he was doing this, the boy closest to the car asked, "Can we get a ride home? We left our money to watch the Mortal Kombat movie at home." Brian couldn't explain why. A sudden sense of fear came over him all of a sudden. He could not understand how he felt so scared when they were just kids asking for a ride home. Normally, your instinct is to help kids in need, but for some reason, he did not feel that way at all. He looked up at the sign that had the times of the movies that were playing at the time, and noticing that the movie they said they wanted to go watch, the Mortal Kombat, had already started. It was the last showing of the night. There was not enough time to drive them home get their money, come back before the movie was over. The older boy said, "It won't take long. We're just 2 kids. We don't have a gun or anything." Brian looked at the boys, wondering why would they say that last bit, and it was then that he saw their face. Before that, the shadow of their hoods had covered it a bit, but now, with looking directly at the boy's face, he saw it then. Their eyes were darker than obsidian. There was no whites at all. That was the moment he rolled up the car window and drove away as fast as he could. Looking in the rearview mirror, the boys were gone, could nowhere be seen. And Brian had to send his check in tomorrow in the daylight. Since it is Halloween, I had found a story on thoughtcatalog.com called 16 Terrifying Encounters of the Black-Eyed Children that occurred on Halloween in Texas. The writer said that they do not believe in paranormal, and they have never had an encounter like this before. This was their first time ever writing a Reddit post, and if it wasn't for their friend insisting they post their story, they would never post it at all. I am glad they did. It's very creepy. Here's the story. It had been a very slow trick-or-treating night. Well, they usually have kids from all over the area dropping off and parading around the neighborhood trick-or-treating. But on this night, only 8 to 10 groups had come by. Since it was getting late, about 9:30, and no kids had been by lately, her husband and her decided to turn off the porch light and let their American bulldog, Chloe, out of her cage they had left her in so she wouldn't scare the kids. With the dog Chloe at her feet and her husband taking a shower, she continued to watch some scary movie she was watching. The movie did have her freaked out a bit. Around 10 p.m., there came a knock at the door. Who could still be out at this time of the night, she thought. Countering it with it could be a neighbor coming by and wanting to show off their costume to her. She is very close to her neighbors after all. As she was walking towards the door, she had an uneasy feeling coming over her. Why did they knock when we have a glowing doorbell that you can clearly see in the dark? She asked herself. The knock, knock, knock came again, and she looked around, and her dog normally would beat her to the door, was nowhere to be seen. She did look around quickly to see where her dog was, not wanting her to sneak out when the door was opened, and found her at the back door, crouching down. Very strange, she thought. She told the dog to go to her cage, but the dog would not budge at all. Looking back at the front door that had a big window on it, a car drove by, and the light of the headlights crashed the light on the porch and was showing that it was just 2 kids standing at the door. Relieved that it was just kids, she turned the porch light on. The kid seemed young and was too young to still be out at this time of the night, all alone, and about the ages of 11 or 12, and the other one looked 8 or 9. Opening the door just enough that if the dog did decide to investigate the visitors, she could stop her. The kids at the door were not in costume and did not say trick-or-treat like she expected them to, but instead said, "Ma'am, can we come in to use your phone to call our mom?" As the kid talked, she felt something in her stomach telling her something was wrong, but she couldn't think what that could be. These were just kids after all. This was at the time that everyone had cell phones, and she had got this thought just then. As she asked the kids, "Do you have a cell phone to call your mom?" Both kids turned to each other, as if to talk amongst themselves, but didn't say anything at all, and then turned back to her and replied, "Ma'am, our cell phone battery does not have any charge left in it. Can we please come inside and call our mother? We're alone out here, and my brother is scared," said the little girl. She wanted to help these kids, but sudden fear kept growing in her. So she said, "Honey, why don't you give me your mother's phone number and I'll call her for you?" After a long pause, the girl said, "Ma'am, my brother has to use your bathroom. Can we please come inside while you call her mom?" She then walked towards the door as if to just walk right into the house on her own. Walking into the porch light, she could finally see clearly details of the girl's face. But up until then, they had stood in the shadow of the porch light, and to it was the startling that she could see the girl's eyes were dark orbs of solid black. This scared the last of her motherly instinct right out of her. Terror was the only thing she could feel now. She started to close the door as the girl started to plead again. "Please, ma'am, we're really scared and alone out here. We have to come inside. Please help us." Then, as if on cue, they both started to cry and whimper. She closed the door and told them she was not going to let them in her house. Standing there, torn between getting her husband and not wanting to lose sight of the kids, she shook in fear. She then decided to call her neighbor, and making her way to the phone, she noticed her dog was no longer at the back door. She was later found in the guest room under the bed. She continued on calling her neighbor from across the street, and keeping an eye on the children at the door, she saw them walking away from the door and heading towards the street. While waiting for the neighbor to answer the phone, she had looked out the window of the door, and she saw the kids were at the street now. After finally getting to talk to the neighbor and asking them to meet her outside by the lamppost, which was only a few minutes tops that they were on the phone for, the neighbor and her looked up and down the street, and the kids were nowhere to be seen. Another popular story of the black-eyed kids is one where the people opened the door and let them inside. The story goes like this. In Vermont, on a very snowy night, an elderly couple lived in a house that some would say was in the middle of nowhere. While relaxing on this cold winter night, there came a knock, knock, knock on their door. They opened the door curious to see who could be all the way out here on a night like this. On the doorstep were two kids, a boy and a girl. Not making eye contact, the kids said, "Our parents will be here soon. May we come in?" And the couple was very uneasy and resistant at first, but letting them in anyway. The kids sat on the couch, and while the wife went to go get some hot cocoa and cookies, the husband asked them some questions to find out why these kids were out here all alone without their parents. But the kids didn't answer any of them. While back into the room, while noticing their cat was acting scared and angry with the kids in the house, the kids then asked to use the bathroom. Looking at the kids directly to answer them is when they and to direct them to the bathroom, she then saw the kids' eyes for the first time. The kids' eyes were as solid black as a starless universe, she would later describe when she told her story. She then sat with her husband on the couch and saw his hands were covering his face. She asked him, "Did you see their eyes?" And the husband showed her that his hands were full of blood from his bloodied nose. Suddenly the lights went out, and the whole house went dark. In the now blackout house, the wife, even though scared of the kids' eyes, went to find the kids so they wouldn't get lost or hurt in the house they didn't know. The girl's voice was heard from the end of the hallway and came out of the dark, exclaimed that their parents are here now, and the kids then left the house, leaving the front door wide open. At the end of the driveway, there were two men in black standing at a car staring towards the house. The wife waved at them, but neither the kids or the men waved back. Then they climbed into the car and drove away. Then, as suddenly as it went out, the lights came back on. During the weeks that followed, weird and odd things happened. 3 of the 4 cats went missing, and the 4th one was found dead in the pool of its own blood. The husband would continue to have chronic nosebleeds that caused him to finally go to the doctor, where he was diagnosed with the very aggressive skin cancer. Sightings of the black-eyed kids are reported all over the world. I just picked 3 of the many, many stories that are popping up all over, as far away as the United Kingdom to here in North America. If you enjoyed these stories, I recommend you read some of the other great stories of the black-eyed kids online. This is all for the first bizarre and spooky Halloween episode. I hope you enjoyed these stories of the creepy kids with black eyes. Until next time, stay spooky. If you're enjoying this podcast, please give it a 5-star rating where you're listening to this episode. And if you have a spooky story to share, you can send it to bizarreandspooky@gmail.com with the subtitle Spooky Listener Stories. I would love to share your true spooky and bizarre stories on the podcast. If you would like to help Bizarre and Spooky by donating, you can donate at bizarreandspooky.buymeacoffee.com. Thank you, and happy trick-or-treating!